I've never known anything divide people so much as masks have. I associate with quite a few people who are in the protests, as you can see here, and I found a lot of people who object to masks, like us. They call them, if you wear a mask, then you're a brainwashed sheep. If you don't wear a mask, then you're practically a murderer. I don't think I've ever known anything divide people the way masks have. Whereabouts is the middle ground with it all?
Should it not be a case for everybody that if they want to wear a mask, just wear a mask and ignore people who don't want to wear a mask, and vice versa?
Yeah. I think people should just make their own personal decisions, look at the benefits, look at the risks, make their own personal decision, and if they want to, they can. If they don't, then don't.
Do you think there's enough people doing their own research who wear masks?
No, I think a lot of people just go along with it. And I was speaking to Steve, who's over there, a while back. He said he actually goes around talking to people, like in the supermarket, and asking people why they're actually wearing the masks. And he said that a lot of them are saying, well, I do it because I've got to. Not because I think it's safe. They do it because they think they've got to.
Well, they do say, government, that you wear a mask to protect others. And it actually clearly states it doesn't actually necessarily protect yourself.
Yeah,
so, I mean, if you're breathing out your own carbon dioxide, obviously so much will be kept inside that mask, from my opinion, because once you blow up a crisp bag, for instance, it fills with carbon dioxide, doesn't it? Yeah. So the mask is going to be finished off breathing out with carbon dioxide in the mask. So when you draw back in again, you're going to get carbon dioxide plus oxygen.
That's a good point. That's something I've heard mentioned quite a lot. I don't think that's the case. However, I will say that I think masks can affect your breathing. I think it can slow down your breathing. One of the problems I personally have with masks is that it makes people a lot harder to understand. You can't see people's lips move, you can't see people's expressions. And if you're in a busy place like a shop, you can't make out what they're saying at all. And I put up with that. I put up with that. I don't argue with people. I don't tell them to take it off. I don't accuse them of being sheep or of being brainwashed. I just put up with it. And I'm pleased to say, for the most part, I think people are putting up with the fact that I don't. But I have had my fair share of people who object to the fact that I don't wear one.
Have you ever been approached by someone and asked to be not filmed?
No, I haven't.
I've had that experience, and
I know you have.
Yeah, I don't understand why someone would approach a camera and ask not to be filmed.
Yeah.
Because if you're actually, recording at the time and someone approaches you, then asking them not to film you is kind of putting yourself in the frame, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you mean like when someone comes and stands right in front of you and tells them they don't want to be on film?
Yeah. I just find that quite odd myself.
It is. I've not experienced that personally, but I have seen YouTube videos where people have had that. I think it's quite peculiar.
When the government turns around and says once the R rate drops below 1.5% or whatever, we'll release the lockdown and we'll stop the lockdown. Right, the R rate has been lower than 1% for months and months and months. So, and the latest news from the ONS clearly states that the so-called R rate, the infection rate, has officially now dropped between 0.6 and 0.9%. So why are the government still keeping this illegal and unlawful lockdown going when they said once it gets below 1, they'll stop all restrictions?
I got the magazine with me. I will read it. Thank you so much. Very interesting.
Yeah, no.
If you want some proper medical information, burnandcoleman.com.
So we've got the town hall in the background now, haven't we? What do you think of the town hall?
It's a nice building from the outside. I've never been in though. I don't know what it's like inside.
I've noticed over there's a journalist, obviously looks like they're interviewing someone.
Yeah.
What do you think about the other journalists coming down and having independent journalists coming down to record and document these things? What do you think about that?
It's very good. What I wanted to say was about the so-called anti-vaxxers that we have, people who are very much against vaccines. Again, you get quite a few people like that at these sorts of protests, and you hear about it in the alternative media. I'm thinking that they're just as bad as the government. I've been very critical of the government and the media the mainstream narrative, as it were. But you get a lot of like anti-vaxxers. I'm very critical of them as well, and I'm thinking they're just as bad as the government, because the way the coronavirus tests are working is, if you go and test positive for a coronavirus and you get run over by a bus on your way back from the test centre, you didn't die of getting run over by a bus, you died of coronavirus. But the thing is, the so-called anti-vaxxers that are around seem to be using that exact same argument for the vaccine that we've got. So if you go down to the vaccine clinic and have your coronavirus vaccine, and you get run over by a bus on your way back from the vaccine centre, you didn't die of getting run over by a bus, you died from the vaccine. You see what I mean?
Yeah, it makes sense that. I mean, there's a lot of news reports showing thousands of people over the months, new cases.
Yeah.
But new cases is like you just said, in my opinion, same as your opinion. It doesn't mean to say they died of it, just died testing positive with it.
Yeah.
So, for instance, like, getting run over by a bus, if you've got the coronavirus, you're put down as a COVID death.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit
this
odd.
has been the thing all the way through it.
I think the government recognised that earlier on, didn't they? I think it was Patrick Vallance. So Patrick Vallance mentioned that they was wrongly informing the death certificates with COVID in the shouldn't have been.
It's worth remembering again that the ONS rates are people who've got COVID on their death certificate. It doesn't necessarily mean they were infected, because many of them haven't been tested, so we just need to understand the difference.
I spoke to someone on video a few weeks back who said I think his friend's grandfather I think he said he had died of a heart attack, and they put COVID down on the death certificate. And he said that one lie was enough for him to think that the whole thing was a load of rubbish.
On May 11th, Professor Chris Whitty also said most people won't die of this virus.
He did.
And less than 1% of people may die.
Yeah.
And I think statistically, we're talking something like 99.7% of people recover from it.
The seriousness of this virus as an epidemic, and it clearly is a very serious epidemic, but equally the fact that actually the great majority of people will not die from this. And I'll just repeat something I said right at the beginning, because I think it's worth reinforcing. Most people, a significant proportion of people will not get this virus at all, at any point in the epidemic, which is going to go on for a long period of time. Of those who do, some of them will get the virus without even knowing it. They will have the virus with no symptoms at all, asymptomatic carriage, and we know that happens. Of those who get symptoms, the great majority, probably 80%, will have a mild or moderate disease. Might be bad enough for them to have to go to bed for a few days, not bad enough for them to have to go to the doctor. An unfortunate minority will have to go as far as hospital, but the majority of those will just need oxygen and will then leave hospital. And then a minority of those will end up having to go to severe and critical care, and some of those, sadly, will die. But that's a minority. It's 1% or possibly even less than 1% overall. And even in the highest risk group, this is significantly less than 20%, i.e. the great majority of people, even the very highest groups, if they catch this virus, will not die.
The absolute vast majority of people who are dying of coronavirus are the over 80s who, to put it bluntly, are liable to death in the near future anyway. And I think the same thing's happening with the vaccine. We're giving the vaccine to elderly people. Hopefully it will protect them, and it does sound very hopeful so far, but you've got people who are concerned about people dying, soon after they've taken the vaccine. And again, it's the same argument as if they got coronavirus. If you're an 85-year-old and you get the vaccine and you die soon after, it doesn't mean you died from the vaccine. You might have just died anyway of something else because you're of that age. I think my sort of summary is that you can't trust anything that you hear on either side of the argument. That's something I've been very clear about when I've been coming to protest, is that you can't trust the mainstream media, but you can't really trust the alternative media either.
Do you know what a HCID is?
I'm aware of it.
High consequence infectious disease. And when it first came out, the coronavirus, in January 2020, they named it a high consequence infectious disease. Are you aware of that?
I remember it, yeah.
And are you aware then in 2020, March 19th, they reduced the status, no longer fitting the criteria to be a high consequence infectious disease. Are you aware of that? Yeah. So and then the government obviously learnt more about it, and on the government website they stated that it's got low mortality rates. Is that correct?
I can't remember exactly what they said.
Yeah, it's a low mortality rate overall.
Yeah, it just goes to show how it's all a bit dodgy, really.
I think that's a good word, dodgy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dodgy science.
Yeah.
Dodgy. There's quite a lot of dodgy in there.
Yeah, dodgy statistics.
It's a new buzzword for coronavirus. For some people.
Dodgy, yeah.
What about police officers? Can be dodgy.
Yes, I think they can be, yeah.
I'm not anti-police myself, but I am anti-corruption, police corruption. And just like anything in society, you know, there's corrupt people, you know, in Parliament. Yeah. Matt Hancock has just been found acting unlawfully.
Well, that's hardly a surprise, is it?
Yeah, he's just been found acting unlawfully. Some of the PPE contracts haven't been reported within 30 days, and basically some of them have gone to people that he knows.
Yeah.
That's a conflict of interest in many people's eyes.
Yeah.
Is there anything you know anything more about that?
I don't really know anything about it. It's the sort of thing that I would expect from the government. And I think it's the sort of thing that people would do. I mean, to be completely honest with you, if I was in Matt Hancock's position, I'd probably be inclined to give contracts to people who I know if I had the opportunity to.
And I think that's wrong myself personally. I think a lot of the country would think, hang on a minute, self-interest here.
It is, and that's why we need to be critical of them, because I think people are inclined to do that. That's why I just admitted that I would be inclined to do that myself if I was in their position. So that's why we need to question it and, you know, keep people under control, I suppose.
Well, theoretically, if it's unlawful and he's been found acting unlawfully, surely that's CPS concern, Crime Prosecution Service.
Yeah, it would be.
But I do believe somewhere in the contracts, Parliament can be exempt from prosecution while doing their job.
Right.
Or if they believe. I don't know enough about that yet, but I'm sure plenty of people watching this would want to look into that.
Yeah, I will have to look into that because I don't know.
Well,
but I think they'd probably get away with it anyway.
I invite him to address the General Assembly.
Thank you. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, faithful late-night audience. It's customary for the British Prime Minister to come to this United Nations and pledge to advance our values and defend our rules, the rules of a peaceful world, protecting freedom of navigation in the Gulf, to persevering in the vital task of achieving a two-state solution in the conflict in the Middle East. And of course, I'm proud to do all these things. But no one can ignore a gathering force that is reshaping the future of every member of this assembly. There has been nothing like it in history. When I think of the great scientific revolutions of the past, print, the steam engine, aviation, the atomic age, I think of new tools that we acquired, but over which we, the human race, had the advantage, which we controlled. And that is not necessarily the case in the digital age. You may keep your secrets from your friends, from your parents, your children, your doctor, even your personal trainer. But it takes real effort to conceal your thoughts from Google. And if that is true today, in future, there may be nowhere to hide. Smart cities will pullulate with sensors, all joined together by the Internet of Things. Bollards communing invisibly with lampposts, so there is always a parking space for your electric car, so that no bin goes unemptied, no street unswept, and the urban environment is as antiseptic as a Zurich pharmacy. But this technology could also be used to keep every citizen under round-the-clock surveillance. A future Alexa will pretend to take orders, but this Alexa will be watching you, clucking her tongue and stamping her foot. In future, voice connectivity will be in every room and almost every object. Your mattress will monitor your nightmares. Your fridge will beep for more cheese. Your front door will sweep wide the moment you approach like some silent butler. Your smart meter will go hustling of its own accord for the cheapest electricity, and every one of them minutely transcribing your every habit in tiny electronic shorthand stored, not in their chips or in their innards, nowhere you can find it, but in some great cloud of data that lowers ever more oppressively over the human race. A giant, dark thundercloud waiting to burst, and we have no control over how or when the precipitation will take place. And every day that we tap on our phones or work on our iPads, as I see some of you are doing now, we not only leave our indelible spoor in the ether, but we are ourselves becoming a resource, click by click, tap by tap, just as the Carboniferous period created the indescribable wealth, leaf by decaying leaf, of hydrocarbons. Data is the crude oil of the modern economy, and we're now in an environment where we don't know who should own these new oil fields. We don't know who should have the rights or the title to these gushers of cash, and we don't know who decides how to use that data. And can these algorithms be trusted with our lives and hopes? Should the machines, and only the machines, decide whether or not we are eligible for a mortgage or insurance, or what surgery or medicines we should receive? Are we doomed to a cold and heartless future in which computer says yes or computer says no, with the grim finality of an emperor in the arena? How do you plead with an algorithm? How do you get it to see extenuating circumstances? And how do we know that the machines have not been insidiously programmed to fool us or even to cheat us? We're already using all kinds of messaging services that offer instant communication at minimal cost. And these same programs, platforms, could also be designed for real-time censorship of every conversation, with offending words automatically deleted. Indeed, in some countries, this happens today. Digital authoritarianism is not, alas, the stuff of dystopian fantasy, but of an emerging reality. And the reason I'm giving this speech today with this slightly gloomy proem is that the UK is one of the world's tech leaders, and I believe governments have been simply caught unawares by the unintended consequences of the internet, a scientific breakthrough far more reaching in its everyday psychological impact than any other invention since Gutenberg. And when you consider how long it took for books to come into widespread circulation, the arrival of the internet is far bigger than print. It's bigger than the atomic age, but it's like nuclear power in that it's capable of both good and harm. And of course, it's not alone. As new technologies seem to race towards us from the far horizon, we strain our eyes as they come to make out whether they are for good or bad, friends or foes. AI. What will it mean? Helpful robots washing and caring for an aging population, or pink-eyed terminators sent back from the future to cull the human race? What will synthetic biology stand for? Restoring our livers and our eyes with miracle regeneration of the tissues like some fantastic hangover cure? Or will it bring terrifying limbless chickens to our tables? Will nanotechnology help us to beat disease, or will it leave tiny robots to replicate in the crevices of our souls? It is a trope as old as literature that any scientific advance is punished by the gods. When Prometheus brought fire to mankind in a tube of fennel, as you may remember, with his brother Epimetheus, Zeus punished him by chaining him to a Tartarian crag while his liver was pecked out. I talked about a hangover cure. His liver was pecked out by an eagle, and every time his liver regrew, the eagle came back and pecked it again. And this went on forever. A bit like the experience of Brexit in the UK. If some of our parliamentarians had their way. In fact, it was a standard poetic practice to curse the protos heuretes, the person responsible for any scientific or technical breakthrough. If only they had never invented the ship, then Jason would never have sailed to Colchis and all sorts of disasters would never have happened. And it's a deep human instinct to be wary of any kind of technical progress. In 1829, they thought that the human frame would not withstand the speeds attained by Stephenson's rocket. And there are today people who are still actually anti-science. A whole movement called the anti-vaxxers, who refuse to acknowledge the evidence that vaccinations have eradicated smallpox and who, by their prejudices, are actually endangering the very children they want to protect. And I totally reject this anti-scientific pessimism. I'm profoundly optimistic about the ability of new technology to serve as a liberator and to remake the world wondrously and benignly. Indeed, in countless respects, technology is already doing just that. Nanotechnology, I mentioned earlier, revolutionizing medicine by designing robots a fraction of the size of a red blood cell, capable of swimming through our bodies, dispensing medicine and attacking malignant cells like some Star Wars armada. Neural interface technology is producing a new generation of cochlear implants, allowing the gift of hearing to people who would otherwise not be able to hear the voices of their own children. A London technology company has worked out how to help the blind to navigate more freely with nothing more than an app on their smartphones. New technologies produced in Britain, helping the deaf to hear and the blind to see. And we used to think that printing was something that you did to run off a boarding card. Now a British company has used 3D printing to make an engine capable of blasting a rocket in space. In African countries, millions of people without bank accounts can now transfer money using a simple app. They can buy solar energy and leap in one transaction from no electricity to green power. And new advances are making renewable energy ever cheaper, aiding our common struggle against climate change. Our understanding of the natural world is being transformed by genome sequencing, the discovery of the very essence of life itself, the secret genetic code that animates the spirit of every living being and allows medical breakthroughs the like of which we have never known, treatments tailored to the precise genetic makeup of the individual. So far, we have discovered the secrets of less than 0.3% of complex life on the planet. Think what will we achieve, what we will achieve when? And it is a matter of when. We understand 1 or 2%, let alone 5 or 10%. But how we design the emerging technologies behind these breakthroughs and what values inform their design will shape the future of humanity. And that is my point to you tonight, my friends, excellencies. At stake is whether we bequeath an Orwellian world designed for censorship and repression and control, or a world of emancipation, debate and learning, where technology threatens famine and disease, but not our freedoms. 7 decades ago, this General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights with no dissenting voices, uniting humanity for the first and perhaps the only time behind one set of principles. And our declaration, our joint declaration, upholds freedom of opinion and expression, the privacy of home and correspondence, and the right to seek and impart information and ideas. Unless we ensure that new technology reflects this spirit, I fear that our declaration will mean nothing and no longer hold. So the mission of the United Kingdom and all who share our values must be to ensure that emerging technologies are designed from the outset for freedom, openness, and pluralism, with the right safeguards in place to protect our peoples. Month by month, vital decisions are being taken in academic committees, company boardrooms, and industry standards groups. They are writing the rule books of the future, making ethical judgments, choosing what will or will not be rendered possible. Together, we need to ensure that new advances reflect our values by design. There is excellent work being done in the EU, the Commonwealth, and of course the UN, which has a vital role in ensuring that no country is excluded from the wonderful benefits of this technology and the industrial revolution it is bringing about. But we must be still more ambitious. We need to find the right balance between freedom and control, between innovation and regulation, between private enterprise and government oversight. We must insist that the ethical judgments inherent in the design of new technology are transparent to all, and we must make our voices heard more loudly in the standards bodies that write the rules. Above all, we need to agree a common set of global principles to shape the norms and standards that will guide the development of emerging technology. So, and here's the good news, I invite you next year to a summit in London, a wonderful city, where, by the way, it is not raining 94% of the time, and where at one stage when I was Mayor of London, or shortly before, we discovered that we had more Michelin-starred restaurants even than Paris. The French somehow rapidly recovered by a process that I wasn't quite sure was entirely fair. But we still have, by far, in the UK, by far the biggest tech sector, by far the biggest tech sector, fintech, biotech, edtech, medtech, nanotech, green tech, every kind of tech in London. The biggest tech sector anywhere in Europe. Perhaps 500,000 people working in tech alone. And I hope that you will come there and we will seek to assemble the broadest possible coalition to take forward this vital task, building on all that the UK contribute to this mission as a global leader in ethical and responsible technology. If we master this challenge, and I have no doubt that we can, then we will not only safeguard our ideals, we will surmount the limits that once constrained humanity and conquer the perils that once ended so many lives. Together, we will vanquish killer diseases, eliminate famine, protect the environment, and transform our cities. Success will depend, now as ever, on freedom, openness, and pluralism, the formula that not only emancipates the human spirit, but releases the boundless ingenuity and inventiveness of mankind, and which, above all, the United Kingdom will strive to preserve and advance. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your kind attention.
I thank the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.